Welcome back to Stress Awareness with Self-Care Oasis. And my name is Noel Miller, exercise specialist and specialist in self-care. So now we're going to go into a different way of looking at how stress impacts us. And last time we talked about the mental aspect. Now we're going to talk about the more elusive emotional aspect. Now, I kind of hinted at the end of the last mental video that there is the emotional component, and that's how we express the situation or not express the situation. So let's see if I could find an example. Generally, emotional expression has to do with lack of the ability to take a feeling and put it into words appropriately. And with that lack of using the right words, we generally have a reaction from the other person that we're trying to express it to, especially if there's more of a heated emotional exchange happening. So, for example, let's say you're in an argument with your spouse. Let's say I'm male and my spouse is female, and we're having this conversation, and I'm just getting so mad and agitated over the topic, and I really want it to end, but I don't know how to express probably the underlying feeling that it's overwhelming, and probably the underlying feeling that you weren't prepared for the conversation and can't, let's say, adequately be a positive contributor to what's happening. And most likely the situation is kind of heated, and we should take time to take a break before we have a more positive conversation of how to change the dynamic. So often, very, very often, this happens, and the general idea is that ladies tend to be way more versed at expressing emotions. Whether properly or improperly, that just seems to be a thing that happens. And guys generally are really good at repressing emotions. So we could think of this as not having the right language to communicate in that situation. So it's like if you don't have a second language that is emotion, and you're trying to talk to somebody who speaks very fluently in emotion, you can see how that's going to be frustrating and stressful from the very beginning. Right? If I only understand English and you're speaking French, then we're going to have a communication barrier. And with that communication barrier, I might say something that in your mind is very upsetting, but I meant it very lightly, and vice versa. So this is something we have to be extremely aware of, especially in relationships. And this is always going to be something that you have to come together and realize that that's a thing, and it does happen, and it causes tons of stress needlessly, just because it's not as clear of a communication, and vice versa. If generally the person that's a lot more easy to express their emotions might have a harder time, let's say, sticking to the facts of the situation, what really happened, because that's generally the polarity between emotions and logic. Logic is extremely realistic, maybe, and there's not much variance in what happens. Emotions are a lot more free-flowing, and you can feel many different ways about one situation, but we still want to resolve that, and to resolve it, we do have to lend a little bit more to the logical side of things. And the situation might change based on the situation. So I hope understanding this helps you see that the only way really to have a solid conversation and reduce stress when it comes to communication is taking the time to not just hear the words that are being used, but try to feel out the place it's coming from. I've been many situations where a person might be saying something extremely blunt towards me, but it's coming from a loving place. But what we're talking about is super important to me, and I get upset from how they're saying it, but not where they're saying it from, the place that they're saying it from. So this is how it kind of balances out. That being said, it's very important always to have compassion in the conversation. And when compassion's there, when you care about the feeling of the other person and not just protecting your own feelings, then we could have a more clear conversation, and this leads to a more ease of conversation, regardless of the fluency in emotion or fluency in logic of the situation. So stay tuned, and this again is to prompt you guys to ask more questions, and in that way get a better understanding of how it actually works out and the dynamics to create a better use of communication in a way of reducing stress. So stay tuned for the next video, which will probably be on more of the physical environment of stress.